This is a great article by The Atlantic and Graham Wood, which is titled "Russia is Not Winning." Last year, Russia made slow progress in Ukraine. Tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands, of Russian soldiers were killed or wounded, and whole mechanized divisions were lost in exchange for Ukrainian territory slightly larger than the state of Rhode Island. At that rate, Russia will control all of Ukraine in about 118 years. Keep that figure in mind when you hear President Donald Trump or Vice President J.D. Vance declare, as Trump did last week at their Oval Office meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, that Ukraine is not winning the war and that it is in a very bad position. Russia's position is also bad, and perhaps more agonizing, because Russians taste the extra bitterness that comes with the knowledge that they could, in February 2022, have just stayed home and not started the war. Both sides have lost, which means that declaring only one side the loser is a peculiar choice. In one of the main areas of operation in Donetsk, Russia lost about 500 tanks and 1,000 armored personnel carriers, roughly a division for every 10 clicks of movement. Russia has recently been observed using pack mules in lieu of mechanized equipment. The United States military has protocols for the modern use of mules in jungles and in rugged, craggy terrain. To use them in the flatlands of eastern Ukraine suggests desperation. The Russians have been burning through their Soviet-era stocks. Uralvagonzavod, Russia's tank factory, and Tula, its ammunition factory, have been working without breaks since the war broke out. Tanks and other resources can be seen in satellite imagery, and the motor pools full of old ones empty out as they get shipped to the battlefield and obliterated. Assuming they don't get a massive vehicle injection from the North Koreans or the Chinese, the Russians are on course to run critically low in the next 12 to 18 months. Russia has covered storage that could conceal more vehicles, but most signs point to eventual depletion. Conditional, of course, on Ukraine continuing to receive military aid at the pace it had been before Trump cut it off this week. Most of the frontline kills are now attributable to drones, and Russia can build new drones much faster than it can build tanks. Since the beginning of the war, Ukraine has had the mother of invention on its side. By necessity, it came up before Russia did with clever new ways to use drones. But Russia then noticed the innovations, developed countermeasures, and deployed drones of its own, using the new capability, but at a greater scale than its much smaller enemy. None of this iterative loop of deadly innovation involves tanks. Heavy equipment gets taken out. Most of Russia's advances are infantry advances. Drones are harder to use against dispersed, small groups. The main countermeasure is mortar fire, which is cheap and mobile. Again, not a serious constraint that requires around-the-clock shifts in Russian factories. The total number of Russians and Ukrainians killed in the war remains in dispute among experts. Although all agree that the numbers are unsustainable on both sides, even over the course of a war much shorter than the 118 years it would take Russia to completely control Ukraine. Earlier this year, Trump himself estimated that Russia has lost 1 million troops, a rate that would leave Russia, whose current population is 143 million, empty before its forces can reach Lviv. Most others estimate a much lower number. Ukraine's top general, Oleksandr Syrsky, estimated that Russia suffered 427,000 casualties last year, including but not limited to deaths, a number that is surely inflated. Russia's ability to recruit new personnel is completely busted. Vladimir Putin has relied on mercenary and convict soldiers, combined with lavish bonuses for poor Russians who volunteer to try their luck against killer Ukrainian robots on the steppe. Russia is willing to discuss a temporary truce in Ukraine provided there is progress toward a final peace settlement, according to people familiar with the matter in Moscow. In the first signal of a positive response from President Vladimir Putin to U.S. counterpart Donald Trump's call for a ceasefire, the offer was conveyed at last month's talks in Saudi Arabia between top Russian and American officials, the people said, asking not to be identified discussing internal policy. In order to agree to a cessation of hostilities, There would have to be a clear understanding about the framework principles of the final peace accord, two people with knowledge of the matter said. Russia will insist in particular on establishing the parameters of an eventual peacekeeping mission, including agreement on which countries would take part, said another person familiar with the issue. The details emerged as the US and Ukraine plan to meet in Saudi Arabia next week for their first direct talks since Trump's Oval Office bust-up with President Volodymyr Zelensky last week. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said the meeting aims to reach a framework for a peace agreement and an initial ceasefire. Ukraine is preparing a third strike on the Crimean Bridge, said Ukrainian Navy Commander Nezhpapa. The Ukrainian Vice Admiral is optimistic that Ukraine can destroy the Kerch Bridge, writes The Guardian. There is a saying, "God loves a trinity," he said. The Central Electoral Bureau of Romania has disqualified pro-Russian candidate Călin Georgescu from the elections, citing his anti-democratic stance following complaints, as reported by Bloomberg. Violent unrest erupted in the capital, with Georgescu's supporters clashing with police forces. The cancellation on December 6th of the presidential election due to allegations of Russian meddling in Georgescu's favor has thrust Romania to the heart of a dispute between the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump and European nations over how democratic values should be defined. In a detailed account published late on Sunday, the election authority said its decision was based on the Constitutional Court's move to cancel the election after Georgescu did not respect ballot regulations. It is inadmissible when rerunning the election to consider that the same person meets the conditions needed to accede to the presidency, the argument said. 2 U.S. Army soldiers and 1 former soldier were arrested on Thursday, charged with selling military secrets to buyers in China. The information allegedly sold includes details about HIMARS rocket systems and armored vehicles, reported CNN's. The 2 active-duty U.S. Army soldiers, Zhang Zhao and Li Tian, were stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington state. Zhao, a battery supply sergeant, was assigned to the 17th Field Artillery Brigade, while Tian served as a health services administrator. The former soldier, Royu Duan of Hillsboro, Oregon, served in the Army from 2013 to 2017. Tian and Duan were both charged with conspiring to commit bribery and theft of government property. Zhao faces the same charge and is also indicted for obtaining and transmitting national defense information to an unnamed individual not authorized to receive it. According to the indictment, Zhao is accused of selling nearly 24 classified hard drives marked secret or top secret, as well as sensitive U.S. military documents and information pertaining to HIMARS rocket systems to buyers in China. The sergeant also allegedly obtained and sold information related to the U.S.'s military readiness in the event of a conflict with China.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Rescues every day. We had a guy last week, it's 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.